What is up, party people? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila. This is JemilaBeReadin because I do be reading. I know it's been a minute, and I know I made a post saying that I was going to come back with my October and November wrap-ups. But alas, you will not be getting a wrap-up from me until January because, to be honest, I don't really feel like filming it. But yeah, I'm here, and today we're going to talk about my favorite reads of 2022. So let's just get right into it. The first one is, I think, my most recent read, and that is this great little novella over here called Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. This is, I feel like the way I've been describing this book is supernatural meets A Master of Gin by P. Djeli Clark. We are following a magical detective who is trying to solve this recent murder, and there may be angels involved, and she's coming into contact with her long-lost brother, and we have a sapphic relationship, and it's just really a wild time, and I highly recommend the audiobook if you pick this one up, just because the narrator does such a fantastic job. It's so immersive. I don't know if I mentioned, it's set in the 1940s. It definitely just gives like sapphic supernatural vibes, historical fantasy supernatural, but with queer characters. And it was just such a good time. I'm really impressed with the author's ability to build such a believable and extensive world in such a short amount of time. I really loved the characters. I loved the relationship at the center of this. And my only qualm would be I don't want to say I want it to be a little bit longer because I think the length is fine, but I think the ending did wrap up a little bit too quickly for my liking, and I would have liked a little bit more between the relationship of our main character and her brother. But overall, this was just so much fun, and I really want to check out this author's backlist now. So, good time. Also, what a stunning cover. One of the first books that I read this year was Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki, and it's one that stuck with me throughout the entire year, basically. We're following three different women. One is Shizuka. She is like a violin teacher. At one point in her life, she made a deal with the devil, and she has to entice 7 other violin prodigies. She has one more left, and her clock is ticking in this time frame that she has been given. And she meets Katrina, our other protagonist. She is a young transgender woman who ran away from home, and she is a really good violin player. And so Shizuka kind of takes Katrina in, and it ends up becoming like a really sweet story. And then we also have a third protagonist, and that is Lantran, who is an alien from outer space. Her and her family were escaping a war on their home planet, and they came to Earth and opened a donut shop. And so Shizuka and Lan kind of have a little romance going on, and it's just, considering some of the more intense topics that are discussed in this book, it is so cozy, and the descriptions of food was so good. I was very hungry while reading this book. I really do think that this book is like a love letter to Asian American culture and also food and like the immigrant experience. It was just so good. I really loved it. I loved all of these characters. It was so good, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like this next one is kind of a controversial pick. When I first read it, it was like during its hype phase, and everyone loved it. I loved it. It was a good time. And recently, a lot of people have been coming out of the woodworks and talking about how they don't like this book, which is fine, because I definitely understand that this book is not for everyone. But You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. Now, this is Akwaeke Emezi's foray into romance, and I do think in like big picture romance genre, I do think that this would be considered a romance novel. It hits like the big picture beats, but it is not like what I feel like a lot of people come to expect out of like a traditionally published romance, and I think maybe that's where a lot of the hangups came from. We don't spend like the majority of the book with the main love interest, so I think that is probably a hang up for a lot of people. And then also who the love interest is. I won't get into that. I'll keep it spoiler free. But I don't know. I really like this book. We're following Faye. She's our main protagonist. It's a single POV romance. And I will say, too, that this book definitely airs more on the side of like literary fiction. But we have Faye. She is, when we're starting this book, it's been 5 years since her husband has passed away. She's still dealing with the grief, but she is in a place where she's ready to start dating and kind of like meeting new people again. And so we're kind of following her love adventures, I suppose you could say, her dating adventures. She ends up meeting this guy named Nasir, and then he ends up taking her to his home island. The island is like not actually like named. I think it's supposed to be Jamaica, but I'm not sure. But it is a Caribbean island. He takes her there for like an art thing. I'm kind of forgetting what it, I think it was not in competition, but like some art situation. She's an artist, and so she goes and then ends up meeting someone else there. So I think it's a good time. I thought it's definitely a messy book, but I love messy books and messy characters, and I think Akwaeke Emezi does a really good job of showing like what a complicated person Faye is, and also the explorations of grief and just like finding yourself and finding love after grief. And I just thought it was really good. To be honest, Akwaeke Emezi can do no wrong in my eyes personally, but I definitely understand why this has a lot of mixed reviews. So next is the only nonfiction on this list. It was not a big nonfiction year for me. I'm hoping 2023 I'll be back in the mood for nonfiction. I think just with like finishing off school and then taking the bar exam, studying for it, starting a new job, I just did not want to read about the real world. So I didn't read that many nonfiction books. But this one was so good and really made an impact on me. This is Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. In this, Angela talks about her own experience with asexuality, and she also has interviewed many other people who are on the ace and the aro spectrum, people with different gender identities and also sexualities, different relationships to sex. Some people who are sex repulsed, some people who are not. I think she does a really good job of like really spanning the gambit of the spectrum and talking to a lot of different people with different experiences. And I just thought it was fantastic. I really think everyone should read this book. I think it should be like required reading, even if you are not someone who's on the ace or aro spectrum or thinks that they may be. I just think this does such a good job of like tackling and talking about how we talk about sex and how prevalent it is in media, and also how we talk about relationships and the emphasis it's given in relationships, and also just like the hierarchy of relationships, friendships, family relationships, romantic relationships. I thought it was so good. And another one where I highly recommend the audiobook. This next book really took the book community by storm earlier this year, and it got to me too. And that's Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is the self-published version, but it has recently been picked up by Tor and republished. I think it's Tor, or maybe it's Orbit. I can't really remember at this point. But this is, as it says over here, a novel of high fantasy and low stakes. It's a cozy fantasy book, very much slice of life, really not much plot. So if you're someone that likes a lot of plot and world building in your fantasy, which is usually me, you may have issue with this because it's really just following our main character, Vivian, aka Viv. She's an orc, and at the start of this book, she is retiring from being a mercenary, and she has this dream of opening a coffee shop in this town that she once passed, and so that is what she's doing. She's opening this coffee shop, and we're just watching her as she does that and meets new people who end up helping her, other people in the community in the town that she's in. There's a little bit of drama and like a little bit of plot towards the end of this, but really it's like quintessential slice of life. And I absolutely loved it. I read this book right after another book that I will be briefly talking about later. And it just was exactly what I needed. To be honest, like, even though I personally love like heavy plot and heavy world building and fantasies, I love slice of life anime and manga, and so this definitely gave that kind of same feeling. And it was a good time, and now I just want to read a bunch of cozy fantasies. So if you have any recommendations, please drop them in the comments, because I want to be in my cozy fantasy era this winter, okay? Okay. The next book I have here is Sorrowland by River Solomon. This is my first book reading from this author, although I own their other 2 books, and I've been meaning to get around to those for a long time. But this is their most recent release, and it is following this woman named Vern. She is 7 months pregnant at the start of this book, and she has just run away from the cult that she grew up in. She gives birth to twins and is raising them in the forest, but then things start happening. On one hand, she's going through a metamorphosis. Like, her body is literally changing. She's getting stronger and more endurance, but it's also causing her a lot of pain. And then she also, for reasons, decides that she wants to confront the cult and kind of take them down. So she ends up meeting some other people, working with them to kind of uncover the legacy of this cult and its relationship to colonialism and institutional racism and all of that stuff. I thought this was so good. This is a very intense book. It's also kind of genre defying. So it's kind of part gothic horror, part literary fiction, part sci-fi. It's doing a lot of things, and River Solomon has a fantastic writing style. I thought it was so good. I read this in one day, which in retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have, because like I said, it's kind of intense and I wouldn't recommend reading it in one day, but it is definitely readable, and it was so good, and I can't wait to pick up their other 2 books. It's just sitting on my shelves for a while now. I'll get to it eventually. But yeah, check this out. Next, we have Cantorus by Carolina de Robertis. This is a historical fiction, kind of like literary fiction novel following the lives of 4 queer women during the 1970s in Uruguay. So at this time, there is like this military dictatorship. Things are really rough all around for the people living in Uruguay. And on top of that, you have these 4 women who are women who love other women, and they're kind of having to hide that. And so they're both dealing with the impacts of living under a dictatorship and then also having to hide who they are. But they find each other, and then they end up going to this like kind of like shack off the coast. And it ends up being like their safe spot that they return to time and time again with each other. They really become like a family. And it's just, it's so good. It is so good. I feel like this book packs a punch, and it's not even that long. The writing is so beautiful. And what I love about this book is that, you know, there's a lot of like sad and depressing things that goes on in this book, but it manages to be messy and funny and just such a good time, even though like a lot of bad things are going on at the same time. And it's just so good. It's so good. I highly recommend it. I mean, I highly recommend every book that I'm talking about in this video, but wow, amazing. Next, the only book that I don't physically own, I have What a Match by Mimi Grace. This is from an indie author, and it is such a good time. If you're looking for like a rom-com, and I'm not joking when I say a rom-com, okay, because I feel like with all the like cutesy like cartoon covers with romances, it kind of like gives the idea that it's going to be a rom-com, but then it has like some intense ass shit in it and you're like, this is not funny. But I am serious when I say that this is a rom-com. Like, this kind of reminds me of like the peak rom-com movies from like the like early to mid 2000s. It is so funny. It is so funny. I loved the relationship. It was just low stakes, such a chill time. So we are following Gwen, who is just sick and tired of the dating game. So she just decides that she's going to get a matchmaker and have the matchmaker set her up on a bunch of dates so that she can find the one. And then we have Anthony, who is Gwen's older brother's best friend. His apartment's like getting renovated and he needs somewhere to stay, and she has like a spare like I think she has like a pull-out couch or something. So he ends up going and staying with her. And he has like had a crush on her for a long time, but she kind of just like never really paid attention to him. And so it just, you know what, it just ends up being a romp. It ends up being a good time. I highly recommend checking this book out during the fall because it also has peak fall vibes, and it's just it's a good time. Do you see this smile? It's a good time. Check it out. And the last book that I'm going to be talking about briefly is probably my favorite book of the year, I think. But I'm probably not going to talk about it too in depth just because it is a HarperCollins title. And if you didn't know, the HarperCollins Union has been on strike for over a month now. They are advocating for better livable wages. They're also advocating for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And like I said, they've been on strike for over a month now. The HarperCollins hasn't really worked anything out with them. You hate to see it. So in solidarity with the new union, I'm just gonna show the book real quick. It's The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. I feel like a lot of people already know about this book. It's kind of like a generational family saga in the same vein as Homegoing. It is absolutely fantastic. The writing is beautiful. I love this book so much. But I'm going to keep it brief and keep it pushed. By the way, I will also link the Instagram page for the HarperCollins Union in the description so you can go check it out. I'll also link the bookshop page if you wanted to buy The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois or any other HarperCollins titles or just any other books. You can buy it via their bookshop and support the union. Hi, editing me here to come in and let you know that I actually only talked about 9 books when I meant to talk about 10. And the the last book I guess I'll talk about is The Inheritance of Arcadia Divina. I don't know why I like completely forgot about it in all of my like year-end wrap-up videos that I did, especially over on TikTok. But it is one like my most recent read, so maybe that's why. I loved it. It's so good. It's about this matriarch who invites her whole family to her funeral. And at the funeral, she turns into a tree and passes on some like magical things to the family members, and things start happening. We also get like flashbacks to the matriarch's like life story, her journey to America from Ecuador and starting her life here. And it was just absolutely amazing. I loved it so much. I did a mix of physical reading and listening to the audiobook, which I really liked. It was just so good. I can't believe I forgot to include it, but it was definitely like a near 5-star read. I think I gave it like a 4.75, but absolutely great. Definitely errs on the side of magical realism, talking a lot about generational trauma, family history. I absolutely loved it. By the way, I originally filmed some honorable mentions and decided to cut it for time. And also it was kind of all over the place. But if you're interested in seeing some other books that I really enjoyed that didn't quite make it to this top 10 list, I did do a series over on my TikTok account where I talked about my favorite reads by genre. Those are all up right now if you wanted to go and take a look. Also, while you're there, follow me. And also follow me on Bookstagram because I'm there as well. Cool. I say this like after every video that I make where I'm like, no, for real this time I'm going to be posting more consistently. And here's the thing, you know, I started a job and it's been busy, and I also like live at home with my parents currently, and it's just like kind of like always a little bit awkward to film, so that's why I don't. And I'm a lot more active on TikTok because it's like quicker to do and I don't have to like get all dolled up, you know what I'm saying? But I am actually planning on moving into my own apartment early next year, in January, in fact. So, assuming all goes well, I will be having my own place, and it will be a lot more, it'll be easier for me to film, it'll be more convenient, and hopefully I'll actually be consistent this time around. I have a lot of ideas, guys. I have a lot of ideas that I want to implement. I just have like this long ass note on my phone of all of these video ideas that I want to do. But you know, until then, follow me on TikTok and Instagram. Like I said, I'm over there. I'll catch y'all in the next video. Happy New Year.